Hey everyone, and welcome back to the I don't even know how many part series of trying to cram a GPS into the back of a flying machine. So, in case you forgot, let me fill you in. In the previous episodes, we worked on this machine, and also this one and the very first one, which was ages ago, and basically what these things were designed to do is count the distance they fly in a particular direction, so they can stop at just the right point. The way this task was supposed to be accomplished kind of varied a bit. For this first one, we sort of relied on the existence of a metaphorical fuel source, being this hoe, and as long as you kept hoeing this piece of dirt, then the flying machine would fly, but the moment that this hoe were to break, then it would stop. To fill you in again, this other one tackled the situation slightly more mechanically. Here we have actual physical counters, and these are going to count for us, instead of wasting away on some other data storage method. But surprisingly, even though I do very much consider this version to be a significant upgrade to this one both in speed, distance, and a few other things, we're actually going to be focusing on this one today. The reason is, though this machine, this upgraded version, does check a lot more really important boxes than this other one, it suffers from a fatal flaw, and it's that it's ridiculously clunky and impractical. The thing is this does not fulfill the role of a machine that you're supposed to very temporarily construct and then rapidly disassemble once you've arrived at your destination. And that does not mean that this other hoe-based design is free from this flaw. You see, the thing is it's also incredibly clunky for what it does. But the difference between the two and what makes this one a little bit more special for today's video is that it has potential. The concept was there and the idea was brilliant, but the rancid execution by me about 6 months ago kind of fell off. So today we're going to be talking about how I took a very awful idea and actually turned it into something maybe useful. But before we learn about the designs that absolutely blew the previous one out of the water in terms of both size and speed, let's talk about what was wrong with that thing. To start off with, it uses the absolute worst braking mechanism possible. What I mean by this is if we compare this to an actual car, a good braking mechanism is one where you hit the brake pedal and it stops the wheels. This stops your car. This design would be essentially you smashing the window, crawling into the hood, and jamming a wrench directly into one of the pistons of the engine. This comparison works because the thing is that when you actually stop the mechanism because you ran out of hoe durability, it literally uses this arm to send the information all the way back to the source of the movement, the engine, to tell it to stop. I'll never get over just how silly of a design decision this was, because the fact of the matter is that you can attach the braking mechanism to literally anywhere on the entire flying machine. On the previous two episodes, the example, we just stuck it onto the front, literally only because there was space there. The freedom to stick the braking mechanism basically anywhere in the flying machine is derived from the fact that it's literally just a fancy solid wall. Meaning, if any part of your machine crashes into that solid wall, then the rest is probably going to crash into that too. As long as the engine is eventually stopped by this continuous chain of crashing, then all the other parts will lose all propulsion and the machine will no longer be able to go anywhere. The last remaining problems are just that it's incredibly slow, which is partly due to the terrible braking mechanism, as well as being incredibly slow due to the fact that all of this design stuff is incredibly archaic. This makes sense because I designed that thing over there before I learned all about the much more optimized variants of flying machine feed tape design. Ultimately, the discovery of these rancid problems, as well as the various insights I learned through designing all of those hunks of garbage over there, is what leads us to this thing. It's basically a quarter of the size, it runs at a blazing almost 1 block per second, and it does exactly the same thing with a significantly cheaper design. But how does it work? Essentially, this flying machine operates on a very simple principle. Every time it moves, it pushes the singular glass block forward. However, we've got a separate timer on the side, which loops this observer around the cycle, meaning every 20 blocks this observer is going to power this sticky piston an extra time. What this essentially does is it changes this glass block from being 1 block ahead to directly in front of the sticky piston when the machine tries to move. And this is incredibly problematic for the machine because now it has to push 13 blocks in order to move forward. This single mechanism means that every 20 blocks it's going to try and put the machine into a state where it's going to crash into itself. But luckily, you're going to be sitting right here and you're going to hoe this piece of dirt when it comes up in front of this wall block, once again switching the state to moving the glass block forward. Now, as you can see, it can push the 12 blocks since it's no longer exceeding the push limit, and then it'll continue to travel forward. The funny thing is that the only reason that the machine can continue to fly is exclusively because these two things that would otherwise destroy the machine happen at the exact same time, and they cancel each other out, allowing the machine to continue flying. And see, this is where the video would have ended, except halfway through I just had a revelation that led to an even smaller design. And the way I'm going to explain this is a little bit weird, but basically, this design I'm standing on top of asks the question, when do I hoe the dirt? Whereas the new design asks an entirely different question. It asks, when have I not hoed the dirt? Let me explain. This thing is essentially using the timer to count every 20 blocks, in which it will perform an active check to see if the dirt has been hoed. However, this machine is completely different in that it's never performing any active checks at all. It's only just passively ready to shut down the moment a dirt block passes in front of its sensor that isn't hoed. This is done with a very similar simple wall setup that basically does nothing for the entire runtime of the machine, just sitting here because we're pretty much exclusively passing by slabs and hoed dirt in front of it. However, the moment the player's hoe breaks, it's no longer going to be able to hoe the dirt, which means that we're going to get a solid block. And this is going to change, causing the glass block to move back and overloading the engine to 13. Since there's no timer needed for the active check timings anymore, we can essentially cut the machine in half as we don't need that second feed tape. However, this machine comes with a very small caveat. It doesn't even work with hoes. It can only work with shovels now. It might be very difficult to see why these have any difference at all, because with our machine we're using wall detectors, and both of these change in exactly the same way, whether it's being hoed by a hoe or shoveled by a shovel. And theoretically, you could run this machine for probably 50,000 blocks without it ever breaking. But the reality is that there's this one tiny, astronomically small chance of occurring event that can completely break it. In order to demonstrate this astronomically low chance of happening event, I've gone ahead and set up this machine. Here we have a system that basically this player is going to keep hoeing this dirt, and every single time it's going to reset and they're going to hoe it again. If they don't hoe it, like if I stand in front here, it's going to activate this dispenser. But since they keep hoeing it, it's never going to trigger the dispenser. Except, if I repeat this same action an incredible amount of times, I put 16 snowballs in here, and it is over an incredibly long period of time, we're going to see some snowballs start to disappear. The reason why this is occurring is because in the tiny moment between this dirt being tilled and it arriving in front of the wall block, exactly what's happening in our machine up there, it has a chance to untill. There is no set time between when a dirt is going to dry up. It's actually just going to make a very low chance call every single moment. This is actually sometimes a very real problem with underwater flying machines, because if kelp happens to grow in the exact moment that it passes over and triggers an observer in extra time, it could break a machine. So while shovels and hoes seem to do exactly the same thing, in the long run, hoed dirt always has a chance of just drying out. So now I'm going to finally beg the question, is this actually practical? Because all the developments we've ever made in this field have been really just pipe dreams and really clunky and unable to be used, but this design is actually small enough and clean enough to actually warrant being used in a real setting. It also boasts a similarly quick speed to the other optimized design, meaning that it could theoretically actually have some sort of potential for long distance travel. Well, that's ultimately up to you to decide. As a quick side tangent, to all the people who are complaining that it's kind of weird to encode data directly into tools because it's really annoying, There is literally a video and machine on my channel entirely dedicated to doing this exact job incredibly quickly. Except I should probably mention that you shouldn't even go to my video anymore, because another redstone YouTuber named Avogado completely smashed my record doing what I did except 3 times faster. So big shout out to you for, I guess, forwarding the stupid field of science that I developed. But seriously, do go check out their channel. They do a bunch of really cool videos on the super smart instant redstone stuff that I can barely even wrap my head around. Anyways, that'll be it for today's video. This will probably be the last installment of this really stupid series that basically isn't even a series. And if you like the stuff that I make sure to go check out my other stuff. And I'll see you next time. Like and subscribe, and goodbye.